Vincent scrolled through the messages, his jaw tightening with each line. Rebecca and Troy had not bothered with clever code or cautious phrasing. Photos, inside jokes, whispered secrets, and professions of affection scrolled across the screen. Undeniable proof of her betrayal. A dull ache settled behind Vincent's eyes. He placed the burner phone back, careful to leave everything precisely as he had found it. That night, when Rebecca returned home, Vincent was already seated at the kitchen table, a glass of scotch in front of him. The kitchen lights cast long, sharp shadows, making the room feel colder than it should have. "Welcome home," he said quietly, but there was an edge to his voice that made Rebecca pause. She set her purse down with forced casualness. "You're home early," she said, attempting a smile. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. "I was in the area and thought I'd surprise you." Rebecca hesitated, caught between relief and suspicion. She moved to the fridge, but her hand shook ever so slightly as she poured herself a glass of water. Vincent watched, noting every detail. After a charged silence, Vincent asked, "How's work at the gallery?" Rebecca's answer was quick and practiced. "Fine. We're opening a new exhibit next week. It's been busy." Her gaze didn't quite meet his. Vincent nodded, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Glad to hear it. The conversation died there, the silence between them growing almost physical. Upstairs, Amanda's room was empty, her posters and art projects untouched. Rebecca cleared her throat. "Is Amanda staying over at Mia's tonight?" "Yes," Vincent said. His voice was soft, but that same edge remained. "She called earlier." Rebecca managed a tight nod. "That's good." They both knew Amanda's absence left them with no buffer. With a sigh, Vincent leaned back in his chair. "Rebecca, can we talk?" He spoke softly, but there was no mistaking the command beneath his words. Rebecca set her glass down too hard, water sloshing onto the counter. "About what?" "About the things you've been hiding from me." Vincent's tone sharpened just enough to make her flinch. Rebecca's pulse quickened, her thoughts racing. She forced herself to maintain eye contact. "What are you talking about?" Vincent let the silence draw out. Then he spoke with chilling calm. "The phone in your jewelry box. The texts. Troy Kellerman. I think Mom's cheating on you." Amanda's words trembled in the quiet study, hanging there with all the weight of unwanted truth. Vincent's heart clenched, but he kept his face impassive. He couldn't let Amanda see how much those words hurt. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart," he said gently. "You did the right thing." Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to, but it's not fair to you, Dad. You deserve to know." He reached across the desk, squeezing her hand. "It'll be okay, Amanda. I promise. This isn't your fault, and I'll take care of it." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too," Vincent replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Go get some rest. You've got a big test to study for tomorrow." Amanda managed a weak smile and left the study, closing the door softly behind her. Vincent sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Now there was no room for doubt. His wife's betrayal was no longer just a suspicion or a collection of damning messages. It had invaded his home, his sanctuary. He poured himself another drink, feeling the burn of the alcohol chase away the chill that had settled in his bones. Vincent knew what he had to do next, but for Amanda's sake, he would tread carefully, no matter how much it hurt. Later that night, as silence settled over the house, Vincent resolved that tomorrow, the truth would come out. One way or another, their perfect facade was about to shatter. "Is everyone okay here?" Officer Martinez asked, his hand hovering near his weapon, eyes scanning the scene. Vincent stepped back, allowing the officers to enter. "I'm fine, but my wife and her lover are upstairs. They attacked me when I confronted them." The officers exchanged a glance, then moved swiftly up the stairs, Vincent close behind. Amanda and Kelly followed, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. In the bedroom, Rebecca and Troy were tangled in the sheets, their faces flushed with panic and guilt. The room reeked of cheap cologne and desperation. Troy, half-dressed, scrambled for his clothes, while Rebecca clutched the sheets to her chest, her eyes darting between the officers and Vincent. "What is the meaning of this?" Rebecca demanded, her voice shaking. "Vincent, what have you done?" Vincent's expression was cold, unyielding. "I found out about your little secret, Rebecca, and I wanted to make sure everyone knew the truth." Officer Martinez stepped forward, his voice firm. "Ma'am, we received a report of a domestic disturbance. Can you explain what's going on here?" Rebecca's face paled, but she tried to maintain her composure.
"This is a misunderstanding. Troy and I were just discussing a gallery event. He's an artist and we were going over some details."
Troy, now fully dressed, stood beside her, his face a mask of defiance. "Yeah, that's right. We were just working." Vincent scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. "Working? Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a lot more than that." Officer Martinez turned to Troy. "Sir, do you have any identification on you?" Troy hesitated, then pulled out his wallet, handing over his driver's license. The officer took it, his eyes narrowing as he read the details. "Troy Kellerman," he murmured, then looked up at Vincent. "Sir, do you have any evidence to support your claims?" Vincent nodded, pulling out a folder from his back pocket. "I have text messages, photos, and a detailed dossier on Mr. Kellerman's financial and personal history. It's all there." The officer took the folder, flipping through the pages. His expression darkened as he read. "This is quite the collection you have here, Mr. Morrison." Rebecca's voice trembled as she spoke. "Vincent, this is crazy. You can't just accuse us of—" Vincent cut her off, his voice like ice. "I can and I will. You've been lying to me for months, Rebecca, and now you've brought this lowlife into our home, into our daughter's home." Amanda stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I saw them, officer. I saw them together. They were upstairs in my parents' bedroom." Kelly nodded in agreement. "I was with her. We both saw it." Officer Martinez looked at Rebecca and Troy, his expression stern. "Ma'am, sir, I'm going to need you both to come down to the station. We need to sort this out." Rebecca's face crumpled, but she didn't resist as the officers led her and Troy downstairs. Vincent watched them go, his heart heavy with a mix of anger and sadness. As the police cars pulled away, Vincent turned to his daughter, pulling her into a tight embrace. "It's over, Amanda. It's finally over." Rizzo's voice was a low growl, his eyes flashing with anger. "This man is a decorated veteran and a respected member of the community. He's done more for this city than you'll ever know, and you're going to treat him with the respect he deserves." Officer Martinez looked at Vincent, then back to Rizzo, his confusion turning to realization. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." The cuffs were removed and Vincent stood, rubbing his wrists. Rizzo turned to Vincent, his expression softening slightly. "Vince, you okay?" Vincent nodded. "I'm fine, Frank. Thanks for the assist." Rizzo clapped him on the shoulder. "Any time, Vince, any time. Now let's get you out of here." As they walked out of the station, Vincent could feel the weight of the night lifting. He knew he had won this round, but the game was far from over. Rebecca and Troy were still out there, plotting and scheming, but for now, he had the upper hand. Vincent stepped out into the cool night air, taking a deep breath. He turned to Rizzo, extending his hand. "Thanks again, Frank. I owe you one." Rizzo shook his hand, a grim smile on his face. "You've already paid that debt, Vince. You've paid it many times over. Just take care of yourself and your family." Vincent nodded, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. He had a lot of work to do, and he knew exactly where to start. Mr. Kellerman, Vincent said pleasantly, but his words carried the weight of a threat. I'd suggest you go home. This is a family matter now, and your involvement ends here. Troy swallowed, his bravado faltering under Vincent's steady gaze. He looked to Rebecca for support, but she avoided his eyes. Fear and uncertainty etched across her face. Troy nodded quickly, backing away toward his car. Yeah, of course. I'm just glad everyone's okay. He got into his car and started the engine, eyes darting nervously before speeding off into the night. Rebecca stood beside Vincent in the damp parking lot, shivering despite her expensive coat. Her mask of composure was slipping, panic rising as she realized the depth of trouble she truly faced. Vincent looked straight ahead, his voice low and measured. Let's go home, Rebecca. She hesitated, then fell into step beside him. The ride home was silent, the tension between them thick and suffocating. Every streetlight flashed across Rebecca's face, illuminating the guilt and confusion there. When they arrived, Vincent waited until they were inside and the door was securely closed. He turned, finally giving her his full attention. You thought you could destroy me with a few well-placed lies, he said quietly, a bitter smile touching his lips. You underestimated me. That won't happen again. Rebecca blinked rapidly, her composure crumbling completely. Vincent, Don't, he interrupted, holding up a hand. We're not going to play these games anymore, Rebecca. Not in this house. Upstairs, Amanda and Kelly listened through the cracked doorway, the tension in the house settling around them like fog. Vincent's world had changed, but he was ready. He would protect Amanda, safeguard his reputation, and make sure that neither Rebecca nor Troy would ever threaten him again. The Morrison family's perfect facade was gone, replaced by a new reality, one shaped by truth, power, and the hard lessons of betrayal. The taller man continued, his tone polite but carrying a steely undercurrent. Mr. Morrison is a reasonable man. He wants to propose a solution, one that benefits everyone, especially you. Troy's brow furrowed, suspicion warring with desperate hope. What kind of solution? The second man smiled, professional and cool. You walk away. No police, no public embarrassment, and your debts, those messy financial issues you've been having, go away. Quietly. But only if you never contact Mrs. Morrison again, for any reason. This offer expires today, Mr. Kellerman. If you decide not to accept it, your creditors will be informed of your whereabouts, and some of them aren't nearly as polite as we are. Troy's hands trembled. He glanced around the studio, as if searching for help among his unfinished sculptures. You're serious. As serious as it gets, said the first man. You get a fresh start, and so does Mrs. Morrison. Troy looked between them, sweat beading at his temples. The offer was clear, a chance to disappear and be free, or risk facing consequences far worse than a broken heart. After a strained silence, he nodded. I'll do it, Troy whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. Excellent, said the second man, handing Troy an envelope. Inside you'll find instructions on how to settle your debts and where to send confirmation that you've left town. If Mr. Morrison hears from you even once, the deal is off. The men left as quietly as they'd arrived, leaving Troy sitting on a stool, the envelope heavy in his hands. For the first time in months, he felt more fear than hope. Meanwhile, at the Morrison house, Rebecca sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee with trembling hands. Vincent entered, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, he said, setting his own coffee down across from her. Rebecca met his gaze, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. Is this about Troy? It's about everything, Vincent replied. Your plans, your betrayals, our family. I know who you really are now, Rebecca, and you know what I'm capable of. She looked down at her cup, tears pricking her eyes. What are you going to do with me, Vincent? That depends, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. On whether you're ready to start telling the truth and face the consequences, or keep pretending nothing happened. Rebecca finally looked up, fear and guilt battling in her expression. For the first time in their marriage, she realized she had no control. The web Vincent had quietly spun was closing tighter every hour, and she was trapped at its center with nowhere to run. The morning sun filtered through the window, casting sharp shadows on the floor. The balance of power in the Morrison family had shifted forever. Troy stared at him, the words settling over him like a shroud. A confession? For what purpose? He asked, trying to keep his voice from shaking. The second man's pleasant smile barely moved. Consider it a gesture of transparency and insurance. Mr. Morrison values clarity in all things. He needs assurance that nothing untoward happened, nor was contemplated. You sign, Mrs. Morrison signs her own statement, and everyone walks away. Mr. Morrison simply wants his family and business protected, and his reputation untarnished. Troy's shoulders slumped. His escape route was vanishing before his eyes. Even if he had somehow believed Rebecca would liquidate her lifestyle for his sake, the debt numbers alone were staggering. Now, with the confession and financial terms hanging over him, Troy realized this was not an offer. It was an ultimatum. "And if I refuse?" he managed. The first man's eyes glinted, the friendliness fading. "Refusal means Mr. Morrison will release documentation of your relationship, your correspondence, and your debts to the right authorities, as well as the media. You'll find yourself ruined, financially, professionally, and legally. His generosity vanishes, and your creditors become your only companions." Troy looked down, defeated. The two men stood, tidying their jackets as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. The second man placed a pen on the table. "We'll give you until tomorrow morning to make your decision. Instructions are in the envelope. Good afternoon, Mr. Kellerman." They left Troy in the echoing stillness of his studio, surrounded by unfinished art and the reality of the trap closing around him. Back at the Morrison home, Vincent sat in his office, watching the security screens as the sun dipped below the horizon. He had spent years constructing a fortress, literal and figurative, and now every room echoed with the consequences of that vigilance. Downstairs, Rebecca paced nervously, while Amanda hovered on the staircase, silently watching her parents from above. Vincent's phone vibrated with a simple message from his associates. "Delivery made. Terms presented. Outcome likely in your favor." He allowed himself a rare smile. The pieces were falling perfectly into place. Amanda's voice was calm but resolute. "My dream changed, Mom. I want to stay closer to home for now, at least until things settle down." Rebecca's jaw dropped. "You can't make your life decisions based on this family's drama." Amanda's gaze was steady. "It's not just about the drama, Mom. I want to be here for Dad. He's the one who's always supported me, no matter what. I can't leave him alone with everything that's happening." Rebecca opened her mouth to protest, but Vincent intervened, his tone gentle yet unmistakably firm. "This is Amanda's decision, Rebecca. She's earned the right to choose her own path." Tears stung Rebecca's eyes, a potent mix of anger and desperation. Her carefully curated world, her marriage, her finances, her reputation, even her relationship with her daughter, was unraveling thread by painful thread. For the first time, she realized she was utterly alone inside the beautiful home she'd once taken such pride in. Each day the pressure grew. Vincent no longer needed to say much. His quiet presence, his subtle reminders of control, and the sudden silence of old friends who no longer called, were enough to keep Rebecca teetering on the edge. On Friday morning, a bouquet of white lilies, the kind Rebecca hated, arrived at the house addressed to Mrs. Rebecca Morrison with regards. There was no card, but she recognized the message. Someone was letting her know they could reach her whenever they wanted. She found Vincent in the study, reading emails. "Did you send these?" she asked, holding up the flowers with shaking hands. He glanced at them, his expression inscrutable. "No, but it looks like someone wanted to remind you that your actions have consequences." Rebecca stared at the flowers, her breathing shallow. For a long moment she just stood there, the petals trembling, her future more uncertain than ever. Whatever happened next, she understood. The life she'd once taken for granted was gone. replaced by fear, regret, and the cold certainty that the web closing around her would not loosen its grip. Rebecca pulled her arm free, her expression suddenly composed despite the turmoil swirling inside. Troy, running isn't an option. Not for you, not for me. Vincent is 10 steps ahead of us. He always has been. If you want to survive this, do exactly what he says. Sign whatever document he gives you, and pray that's enough. Troy slumped, defeated, his hands trembling around the coffee cup. What about you? Rebecca managed a grim smile. I'll face him. I have no other choice. She left the coffee shop, walking through the rain-soaked streets, her thoughts racing. The image of Vincent with Anthony Torino Jr. lingered, a chilling confirmation of secrets she'd only ever suspected. Every assurance she'd clung to about control, escape, or leverage had dissolved. Now there was nothing but the consequences. When Rebecca arrived home, Vincent was waiting in the study, a single sheet of paper resting on the desk before him. He looked up, his expression unreadable. Sit down, Rebecca. She obeyed, steeling herself. Vincent slid the paper across the desk. This is your chance to tell the truth in your own words. Everything about Troy, about your plans, about what you said. Confess, and I'll consider a peaceful settlement. Rebecca stared at the blank page, her hands shaking. If I do this, what happens to Amanda? Vincent's gaze softened just slightly. Amanda stays out of it. She'll never have to know more than she already does. I'll make sure she's provided for no matter what. Defeated, Rebecca picked up the pen. There was no illusion left, only the stark reality of her own making. Slowly, she began to write, the words spilling onto the page, the truth at last emerging after years of secrets and lies. Vincent watched her, silent and stone-faced, as the trap he'd set so patiently finally closed. She studied the photo, her mind spinning. The gravity of Vincent's words pressed in with chilling certainty. Why are you telling me this? Rebecca whispered, the defensive edge fading from her voice. Vincent met her gaze steadily. Because you need to finally understand the truth, Rebecca. You never really knew who I am, or what I'm capable of. He laid out more photos, covert operations, foreign cities, men and women whose faces were blurred or blacked out. After the army, I used those skills. At first, just to survive. Eventually, people like the Torinos heard about me, and I became a problem solver. You thought you married up. In reality, I've protected you, Amanda, and everything you care about from dangers you can't even imagine. Rebecca sat slowly, numb and trembling. So what happens now? Her voice was small. Vincent closed the safe and replaced the painting calmly. Here are your options. I can ruin you, Rebecca. I have enough here to make sure you never see Amanda again, to leave you penniless and disgraced. Or you can cooperate. Admit what you've done. Accept a fair but lean settlement, and Amanda will never need to know the darkest parts of our marriage. You'll have what's necessary to start over somewhere new, but this is the last time you try to cross me. If you do, there won't be warnings or chances. She looked down, tears streaking her face, utterly defeated. I'll do what you want. Please, just don't hurt Amanda. Vincent's voice softened just enough to sound human. Amanda is innocent, Rebecca. My only goal is to protect her. All you need to do is be honest, sign the confession for the divorce papers, and disappear from our lives quietly. Otherwise, I won't be so generous. Sobbing quietly, Rebecca nodded. She finally understood the enormity of her miscalculation. The man she thought she could manipulate was a man she never really knew, a man with the power to remake or destroy lives without anyone ever learning the truth. Vincent gathered the folder and papers, placing them between them on the desk. It's time for you to own your choices, Rebecca. It's over. Vincent's words hung in the air, cold and precise. You and Troy could take whatever you can carry and vanish. I'll even give you 48 hours to get out before any of my friends. Start asking questions. But if you choose this option, you forfeit every claim to Amanda, to this house, to any part of my business or assets. You disappear, Rebecca, and never contact Amanda or me again. I'll ensure you have enough to start over, but after that, nothing further." Rebecca looked up at him, desperation and resignation warring in her tear-streaked face. "And if we try to come back?" Vincent's gaze was relentless. "That would end badly, for both of you. I suggest you don't test my resolve." She nodded shakily, unable to find any words. For years she had believed herself the clever one, the survivor, the schemer. Now, faced with the true extent of Vincent's abilities and reach, she understood just how outmatched she'd always been. He slid the divorce petition and a pen across the desk. "Make your choice, Rebecca. I want your decision by tomorrow morning." Rebecca stared at the papers, her chest tightening with every silent second. Her entire life, every comfort, every connection, every illusion of control, was gone. In its place was this final, inescapable choice. Disappear quietly, either alone or with Troy, or sign away every last claim and accept the consequences she had never anticipated. Vincent watched her, silent and unwavering, as the world she'd constructed crumbled at her feet, a fate she had once reserved for him. It was a picture of Rebecca, sitting in a chair, her face pale but composed, holding a signed document. The date and time stamp showed it had been taken earlier that day. "She chose to save herself," Vincent said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She signed the divorce papers and agreed to disappear. She didn't even try to bargain for your life. She's already on her way to a new identity, a new life, leaving you to face the consequences of your actions." Troy stared at the photo, his heart pounding. "You're lying. She wouldn't do that to me." Vincent shrugged. "Believe what you want. The fact is she's gone and you're here, alone, with a confession in your hand and a debt to settle." Troy's grip tightened on the briefcase. "I have the money. Here, take it. Just let me go." Vincent's smile was cold. "The money isn't enough, Troy. You see, you've been a problem from the start. You interfered in my family, my life, and for that there must be a price." Troy's mind raced, desperation clawing at his chest. "I can get more money. I can—" Vincent cut him off. "It's not about the money, Troy. It's about sending a message. You can't just waltz into someone's life and think you can take what you want without consequences." Troy's eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but Vincent was between him and the only exit, his stance unyielding. "I need to know something," Vincent said, his voice low. "Did you really love her? Or was it just about the thrill, the money, the escape?" Troy's voice trembled. "I loved her. I really did." Vincent nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Then you understand why I have to do this, because I love my daughter, and I will do anything to protect her from people like you." With a swift, practiced motion, Vincent drew a small, sleek pistol from his jacket and aimed it at Troy. The sound of the shot echoed through the empty pier, a sharp, final crack that shattered the silence. Troy's body crumpled to the ground, the briefcase clattering beside him. Vincent stood over him, his expression unreadable, the gun still pointed at the lifeless form. He checked Troy's pulse, confirming what he already knew. Then, with a sigh, he holstered the weapon and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number, his voice calm and composed as he spoke. "It's done. Clean up the mess and make sure there's no trace left. I want this to disappear, just like everything else." He hung up and walked away, leaving Troy's body behind. Another problem solved, another threat eliminated. The night swallowed him, and the pier returned to its silent, desolate state, the only witness to the final act of Vincent's meticulous plan. Rebecca barely listened as her mother pleaded with her over the phone. She stared at the peeling paint on her apartment wall, numb. "It's over, Mom," she said quietly. "There's nothing left to fight for." The hollowness in her voice silenced her mother, who finally sighed and promised to send a bit of money, but Rebecca knew not to expect much. Everywhere she looked, there were reminders of her fall. Once lavish jewelry now locked away under legal orders, invitations to luncheons or gallery openings replaced by bills and late notices. Isolation seeped into every corner of her new life. The city she once commanded with charm now swallowed her with indifference. She tried to reach out to Troy a few times, but he ignored her calls and messages. Even in her loneliness, Rebecca understood. Vincent's shadow stretched long, and Troy was smart enough to run from it. Occasionally, she caught a glimpse of regret, the aching memory of afternoons in sunlit galleries or Amanda's laughter echoing through a house she'd never see again. Meanwhile, Amanda blossomed close to home. Her relationship with Vincent grew stronger as years passed. She never learned the darker truths of her parents' final days together. To Amanda, her mother was simply someone who made mistakes and drifted away out of necessity. For Rebecca Morrison, the consequences of betrayal were measured not just in lost money or comfort, but in the ache of what she could never reclaim: trust, family, and belonging. With each passing day, she realized the real price of love misused, and that some mistakes cannot be undone. Her once stylish hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her wardrobe was made up of second-hand clothes. She worked double shifts and rarely spoke to anyone beyond polite small talk with customers. No one in Portland knew her past, and Rebecca worked hard to keep it that way. Every night she returned to her apartment, the city's rain whispering at her window, and sat alone with her memories. The glamour of St. Louis, the art gallery events, the country club luncheons, those now felt like someone else's life. Rebecca spent her evenings scrolling old photos on her phone, images of Amanda's high school graduation, vacations with Vincent, and happier versions of herself smiling in expensive clothes. But those faces belonged to a woman who had believed she could have everything without ever paying the price. On Vincent's side, life continued with the quiet order he preferred. He and Amanda settled into their new home, their bond unbreakable. Vincent never spoke about Rebecca except in the most neutral terms. Amanda, for her part, gradually moved forward, excelling in her studies and choosing her own circle of friends. They carved out a peaceful existence far from the chaos that had once threatened to swallow them. As autumn descended on Portland, Rebecca stood at her diner's front window, watching the leaves swirl in the wind. She thought of Amanda all the time, wondering if her daughter was happy, if she understood any of the regret and longing that now haunted her mother's days. But there were no more phone calls, no letters, no second chances. Rebecca had gambled everything on a fantasy and lost it all, not just comfort or money, but trust, dignity, and her place in the only family she'd ever really had. In the quiet that followed, only one truth remained. Some mistakes cast shadows that linger long after the echo of doors closing for the last time. She made her choice, and now she has to live with it. That's how the world works. Actions have consequences. Vincent's tone was firm, but there was a sadness behind his words that Amanda recognized. Amanda reached across the table and squeezed her father's hand. "I won't forget that. I promise." Her eyes glimmered with a quiet strength, a reminder of the lessons she'd learned not just from her father's words, but from her mother's mistakes. Vincent nodded, the corners of his mouth softening into a rare, genuine smile. "That's all I can ask, Amanda. You are my pride. Never forget that." The warmth between father and daughter filled the room. Outside, the world continued its steady march forward, indifferent to the past. Inside, in their new home, Amanda and Vincent looked ahead, prepared to face whatever would come next, bound by hard-earned trust and the unbreakable bond of family. And far away, in the gray rain of Portland and the shadowed back streets of Europe, two lost souls carried the weight of their own betrayals, living reminders that some choices cannot be undone. For Vincent and Amanda, however, there was hope. A future built on strength, honesty, and the resolve never to repeat the mistakes that had cost them so much. That was Vincent's final lesson, both to those who had tried to take from him and to the daughter who remained by his side. As Amanda's laughter echoed down the hall and the glow of their home settled into the night, Vincent felt something unfamiliar. If not quite peace, then a quiet satisfaction. He leaned back in his chair, savoring the stillness, well aware that nothing in life was ever truly safe. But some things, some people, were worth protecting at any cost. For Vincent Morrison, the risks had always been high, the stakes ultimate. But here, with Amanda forging her own future and loyalty forged stronger than ever before, he finally allowed himself to hope. In the lives he had shaped, some protected, some destroyed, the legacy he left would be crystal clear. For those who chose betrayal, the world would forever be smaller and harsher. But for those who chose trust, family, and honor, there was always a way forward, and always a reward. And so, in the quiet of his study, surrounded by shadows and light, Vincent lived on, watchful, wise, and, at last, just a little bit at peace. In his study, surrounded by the quiet wealth he had built through intelligence, determination, and unwavering loyalty to those who truly deserved it, Vincent Morrison closed his laptop and went upstairs to say goodnight to his daughter. Outside, the world continued its endless cycle of trust and betrayal, loyalty and deception. But inside the Morrison house, father and daughter slept peacefully, knowing they had chosen each other above all else. Rebecca would wake up tomorrow in her small studio apartment, facing another day shaped by the consequences of her choices. Troy, somewhere in Europe, would wake to the reality that Vincent's reach was limitless and that true freedom would always remain just out of his grasp. But Vincent and Amanda would greet each day together in their new home, planning for Amanda's future and building something that could last, something built on loyalty instead of deception, trust instead of betrayal. In the end, that was worth far more than any revenge Vincent could have taken. The true price of betrayal was never what Vincent did to them. It was what they had done to themselves. And that, Vincent knew, was justice enough.